So we saw a lot of congestion on Ethereum, and Cosmos aimed to solve that. And then with the introduction of IBC, you can now have these different blockchains that like communicate with each other, which is really cool. But it kind of introduces another problem, which is the problem of building applications on these interconnected blockchains, and that's really kind of the niche where we're going for, because that's where we see the space going. If you're coming from EVM, then to begin with, you're probably used to a lot of tooling being there. And within Cosmos and within CosmWasm, that's not really the case. So there's really a lack of good tooling. And that's like the first issue that we're really trying to address. So we see an aggregation of building, going towards chains that have funding, and that are providing incentives for people to build on, because because it's a really tough market right now. So Osmosis is really hot. Kujira is definitely gaining some traction as well. And Archway, I would say, is a really big chain, really trying to do good things. So when COVID hit, all the stocks went down. And I thought it was a beautiful time to get familiar with what stocks are, how to buy them, invest a little bit. And so I bought my first shares, but they kept going up. And the news kept getting worse and worse. And I felt that there was a huge disconnect between what my stocks were doing and the actual state of the world, which of course drew me into like macroeconomics, how central banks print money to stimulate the economy, which was what everyone was doing at that point. And a lot of people, especially in crypto, were screaming that this was gonna cause high inflation. And that is how I got familiar with Bitcoin and then got completely obsessed with it.
Welcome to Into the Forest with Pine. Today I'm here with Howard from Abstract. Howard, how about you talk a little bit about what you're working on?
Hey Jack, yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Howard. I'm the CTO of Abstract Money, and Abstract Money is an interchain application platform in the Cosmos ecosystem. And let me break that down a little bit. So with the introduction of smart contracts on EVM, we have gotten, really cool applications. We had DeFi Summer. We had, a lot of NFTs. And we've had the Cosmos being kind of a solution to scaling the block space of blockchains. So we saw a lot of congestion on Ethereum, and Cosmos aimed to solve that. And then with the introduction of IBC, you can now have these different blockchains that like communicate with each other, which is really cool. But it kind of introduces another problem, which is the problem of building applications on these interconnected blockchains. And that's really kind of the niche where we're going for, because that's where we see the space going. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, what are like the problems that people are having when they're trying to build like on these smart contracts like by themselves, and kind of what like solutions do you kind of help builders with, and how do how does your product like help them do things that they would have to reinvent the wheel for?
Yeah, so if you're coming from EVM, then to begin with, you're probably used to a lot of tooling being there. And within Cosmos and within CosmWasm, that's not really the case. So there's really a lack of good tooling. And that's like the first issue that we're really trying to address. So we have a tool called CW Orchestrator. And the whole purpose of it is to make it very easy for someone to deploy a smart contract, to interact with it, to test it, and also to share it with other developers so that they can deploy your contracts to their own local environments and build on top of it. So it's kind of an integration tool as well. So I would say that's the first one. The second one is building applications. When you're trying to build an application that's actually novel and that makes use of maybe a DEX or a lending market or some kind of DeFi primitive, then it's really a lot of effort to integrate with that service. So let's say you're like gonna deploy an auto compounder on the Terra network, right? So what exchanges are there on Terra? You got ask report. Okay, how do you actually perform a swap on ask report, and how do you provide liquidity on ask report? Your job as a developer is to like go look in their code, go see how to send messages to their smart contracts, what those addresses are, right? There's a lot of setup. And then, in this interchain environment, let's say you want to also deploy to Osmosis, right? Osmosis is a DEX. So you have to repeat this process completely if you want to deploy your auto compounder on Osmosis as well. So what we do is we provide something that we call adapters. And these adapters provide a standardized interface for interacting with DeFi primitives right now. But this could be any like kind of generic functionality that most chains provide. And then you as a developer don't have to worry anymore about the specifics of an integration. You can just integrate with Abstract, build your app on Abstract, and we handle those complexities for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like in kind of contrasting it to like the EVM, like what do you notice that are like the biggest pain points for like developers in the Cosmos ecosystem?
I would say first of all, funding, right? It's a running joke at this point. But yeah, public goods funding is broken. It's a broken record. And besides funding, I would say I would come back to tooling, right? The tooling to documentation to actually getting the word out about what this technology is, how it works, and why it's better than EVM.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So like where are you kind of like seeing like the most building happening? Like with the kind of teams that you're working with, like what chains and stuff like that are you kind of seeing the most building happening on?
So we see an aggregation of building going towards chains that have funding and that are providing incentives for people to build on because it's a really tough market right now. So Osmosis is really hot. Kujira is definitely gaining some traction as well. Um, and Archway, I would say, is a really big chain, really trying to do good things. And I think that's definitely grabbing some attention.
Okay, yeah. So are most of the projects you're working with like DeFi, or are there some NFT projects in there? Like what do you kind of see as like the most like common things people are kind of building using these Cosmos smart contracts?
Yeah, so currently we're like DeFi is our main um, application stack, I would say. But we've been thinking a lot about like social finance as well, reputation systems, and also interchain applications. And interchain applications is really something that has been thrown around a lot, and we're still like figuring out what that even means. But we're building the infrastructure to enable experimentation in that front. So I think we're gonna see a lot more of that once the IBC bridges to the Ethereum ecosystem are actually in production. I think that's gonna draw a lot of EVM devs to or protocols that we normally develop on Ethereum to reconsider that and to build it in CosmWasm and then use IBC as the like interoperability layer between the two.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So like given that you guys are building out like an SDK and builders are kind of using your products to build stuff, like what are the kind of the unique challenges of like building a like a developer tooling platform that wouldn't be the same as if you were building like a product for like an end user?
Hmm. That's a great question. So first of all, I think it's really hard to get something like an SDK off the ground because you you are basically requiring developers to learn about your specific way of writing these smart contracts. When if your SDK is like in the beginning phases, right? You don't have like that clean of an API. There are like rough edges that are still there. So you really need like the people who already know the technology to start using your product and to build with it and to run into issues that you can then fix. So we've been doing that with 42 for, I would say, like 5 months now. So we've gotten a lot of feedback, we've catched a lot of bugs, and we're really working on cleaning up that API, so the thing that the developer gets exposed to. And with that, we want to make it easier for people who aren't familiar with CosmWasm to just work with abstract, right? So you just start working with abstract, and CosmWasm is like the technology that we use, but not necessarily something that you have to keep in mind. And then another aspect of it is finding developers, right? So there aren't a lot of CosmWasm developers. There aren't a lot of applications actually being built in the Cosmos right now. So it's kind of hard to grab that target audience to find those startups that are looking to write applications. But we do provide them with a lot of support. Anyone who tries to build an abstract, who contacts us, we really help them through that process of like, all right, what is your idea? Then how can we go and start implementing that? And then what's the different tooling that we provide to you to make it easier for you to do that, to test it, to deploy it, and then to integrate it with other services.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So like I read in your bio you said CosmWasm Maxi. So like what kind of initially drew you to kind of building on the IBC over maybe Ethereum or Solana, kind of the other options right now? And like yeah, so like what drew you to that?
Honestly, Tara introduced me to CosmWasm, so I really liked Tara. I liked Anchor. In hindsight, it was all very unsustainable, but back in the day, it was awesome. And I really like the idea of Rust as a language. I think that one of the great things about CosmWasm is that it uses Rust and all the tooling that already exists for Rust and all the packages and um, all the niceties that you have when you're working with a programming language that is used for a lot more things than just writing smart contracts. And with that, like diving deeper into what it uses, right? So Rust is a language that you use to describe, to like write the code for your contract, but then it gets compiled into something that's called WebAssembly. And WebAssembly is kind of like a binary code that can be shared. It's kind of like what the whole Java thing was about, where you write your Java and you can execute it on any environment. It's the same, but it's a million times more efficient. So that really enables a lot of out of the box like ideas where if you can compile to WebAssembly, basically any language can compile to it. So right now it's being done in Rust, but there's a lot of work going on to make it possible to do with something like Python or Go or any other language. And I think that's really powerful. Another thing is that once you have this WASM, you can actually also execute it locally. So you don't have to execute your contracts on a blockchain. You can actually run them locally if you want, or you can create like smart contracts that don't live on chain, but they control on chain smart contracts. So there's like a level of interoperability that doesn't really exist anywhere else.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So like kind of what has you like excited, or like what projects do you think are like really cool going on in the Cosmos?
Actually, I was trying out Penumbra today. So Penumbra is a privacy-focused blockchain, and they're really like tackling the problem. I think bottoms up. I haven't dug too deep into it, but I know that there's a event going on right now where you can install their CLI and then participate in the verification of the privacy guarantees of the network, which I think is really just a cool idea for anyone who's a bit technical to kind of explore. I think that's like my top project right now. Yeah.
That's really cool. I actually haven't heard of them. Um, So I guess overall, kind of what like drew you to crypto in the first place, and like what like why are you here? I guess.
Mm, mm. That's always a good question. So, I got drawn into crypto after investing in the stock market. So, when COVID hit, all the stocks went down, and I thought it was a beautiful time to get familiar with what stocks are, how to buy them, invest a little bit. Um, and so I bought my first shares, but they kept going up, and the news kept getting worse and worse. And I felt that there was a huge disconnect between what my stocks were doing and the actual state of the world, which of course drew me into like macroeconomics, how central banks print money to stimulate the economy, was what everyone was doing at that point. And a lot of people, especially in crypto, were screaming that this was gonna cause high inflation. And that is how I got familiar with Bitcoin and then got completely obsessed with it. Tried to figure out how it worked, tried to figure out like what what could be wrong with it, right? And I couldn't find anything wrong with it, so I just threw all my money in. And then then the inflation, yeah, then the bull market came, the inflation started to kick in, and that really like gave me a passion to learn more about this technology and how to contribute to it.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar experience myself getting into crypto. So kind of looking forward with
Cool.
abstract, like what things are you guys kind of like looking forward to and like building out and stuff?
Mm. Yeah, great question. So we're really looking for projects to partner with. So we have a really great framework at this point to build out your application and to ship it to users. Like two main features that I want to highlight that we're rolling out is first of all, we have interchain abstract accounts, and these are like they're ICAs, so like interchain accounts, but on steroids. So they allow you as a user to not really care about which chain you're using, and we're calling that chain abstraction. But we also allow for chain abstraction for the developers. So let's say that you're building an application that that you want to be cross-chain, that needs to be sending funds between chains, and they need to do some local like swaps, for example. With the problem that I mentioned before, where a developer needs to know the intricacies of an integration in their smart contract, like because we remove that as a requirement, a developer can actually write an application and then deploy it to all the chains where abstract is active, and then they get a kind of distributed system, a distributed application system where their own smart contracts can talk to each other over IBC, and they can do local actions that are like agnostic to the actual implementation. So it really simplifies the developer experience for any developer looking to build applications in the interchain ecosystem. And then the second point I want to mention is our app store. So you can think about an abstract account as kind of like your phone. So you like create your abstract account and you create your phone, and then in your abstract account you have different applications that you can install, and these applications are smart contracts that get instantiated for you, and you own them. So you own everything about this application. You decide when you want to apply an upgrade, right? Like in the App Store, it says like upgrade. You can click that button, but on a smart contract, and you will get some new functionality. Um, and these app stores are really a way for us to showcase how we kind of change the game in how applications are brought to users. Because with this kind of system, you can create really customizable applications for users that they can then manage themselves. And as a developer, we allow you to actually monetize that. So you can write your application. Something that we've written internally is a DCA app. So you want a dollar cost average into Atom. Okay, cool. Install this DCA app. deposit some funds into the app, and then configure exactly how you want to DCA into Atom, and it will do that for you. And you are in complete control over the funds. There is no one who can change the contracts. There's no one who can change the configurations. So, and then you as a developer, you can create these kind of applications and then monetize them. So you can say, anytime that someone wants to install my application, they got to pay me 1 Atom, right? Or maybe on a subscription basis, you can say this week or like per week that this user wants to use my application, they have to pay me 1 Atom. So those are really possibilities that weren't possible before, right? Like you as a developer, you can create your own app, you can push it to our app store, and you can start earning money from it if it's a good application.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool. I think this is kind of a good way to end things. Thank you for coming on to Into the Forest with Pine.
Cool, thanks, Jack.
All right.